This Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we have the 5-3, 3-2 in ACC play Louisville Cardinals taking the road to Clemson, South Carolina to play in Death Valley against the 11th ranked 6-1 undefeated in ACC play though at 5-0 Clemson Tigers. This game will be streamed on ESPN. This is again a prime time night kickoff, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Clemson opened up as an 11-point favorite. The line has trickled down to about 10.5, 10. That's where Clemson is favored right now, and they are given a 67.1% chance to win this game per ESPN's Football Power Index. And this game is interesting to me because this is the toughest competition that Clemson has faced since week 1 against Georgia, where we all know they got splattered 3-34. But then they put a 60-burger on App State. They crushed North Carolina State. The score of that game was not indicative of the bludgeoning that the Wolfpack received. They murdered Stanford. They game-controlled Florida State. They murdered Wake Forest after it being a close game for about a quarter and a half, maybe a half at the very most. And they blitzed Virginia after having a little bit of a bump in the road in the first quarter. Louisville is a top 20 team per FPI. Georgia is obviously top 5, and no one else that Clemson has played so far from the beginning of the year up until this Saturday, or this Sunday, because we're including Louisville in the data set here, is even close to the top 25 in power ratings. So this is a test for Clemson, even though this is not a top 25 matchup. Louisville has 3 losses, 2 in conference, to undefeated in ACC play. They have 1 loss overall to SMU, undefeated overall, Miami, and to a Notre Dame team who has 1 loss. They're not in a conference, 1 loss to NIU, but they've beaten everyone else, beat Texas A&M in week 1. Louisville's played a tough schedule. Clemson has not, outside of playing Georgia in a neutral field in that week 1 matchup. So this is, in my opinion, a fascinating game, and I think it's going to be a good game. The last time these two teams faced off was when the ACC still had divisions in 2022. Clemson won this game against Malik Cunningham, in my opinion, an underrated college quarterback, 31-16 in 2022, back when DJ Uiagalelei was their starter. Now he's at Florida State, benched after a few games. You know the whole deal. Clemson is in a really good position right now to reach the ACC championship game and reach the college football playoff and achieve at the highest level since 2020 that they have to get through their schedule first. And because of how the ACC is playing out, Pittsburgh, SMU, and Miami are also undefeated in conference. Virginia Tech has a loss, and Clemson plays them this November. The Tigers have to win out. They cannot afford a loss if they want to reach the college football playoff and guarantee that they can have a chance at that auto bid in the ACC championship game. Louisville here is playing classic spoiler. And that's perfect because they are coached by the former coach of the spoiler makers, the spoiler master himself, Jeff Brom. So I'm excited to preview this game with you all and give my prediction. But before we do that, I ask that you subscribe to the channel, that you hit the notification bell so that you can get notified when I release new content here, new preview and prediction videos, reaction and analysis videos. I'll try my best to react to this game, even though I have a lot on my plate that I want to react to. Share this channel and video around to other college football fans who are passionate about the sport, because if they are, they'll love this channel. Like the video so that we can show up in your feed more, so that we can get a boost in the algorithm and attract more viewers and more subscribers to this great channel here. College Football with Sam is the best Big Ten football channel on YouTube, and we typically only have covered the Big Ten, or at least rarely go out of our own way. But I am trying to expand our horizons here on College Football with Sam, and while still focusing on the Big Ten, I want to touch on the ACC, the Big 12, bigger SEC games, and really hit on the College Football with Sam name, because it's not Big Ten football with Sam, it's College Football with Sam. Big Ten focus that we will always have, but if you're a fan of the ACC, fan of a school in the ACC, or same applies to the Big 12, SEC, if you're a Big Ten fan watching this and you haven't already subscribed, please do. We want to build the best college football channel on YouTube, and the only way we can do that is with your help. Comment your preview and prediction for this game down below. Join our Discord server where we talk college football 24/7 via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. And if you want to donate to the channel, and support the work we do here, well, you can super chat in the comments section, or you can sign up as a paid member at our Patreon page or purchase merchandise at our merchandise store. There's some comfortable t-shirts that we have there awaiting your purchase. And the links to those are in the description or down below in the pinned comment, just like the link to the Discord server. But the things that you can do for free, liking, sharing, subscribing, hitting the bell, commenting, joining the Discord server, those are the most helpful. So I appreciate all that you've done, and thank you for watching and tuning in with us. Let's look at these teams from a broad view, from the big picture, and we'll get to the details in a few minutes here, because there's a lot to unpack in every matchup, especially a matchup like this where, again, I'm going to say there are high stakes here. Louisville's not going to reach the playoff. It's highly unlikely without some serious chaos that they reach the ACC championship game, and they're not going to. I'm going to say that here right now because I think the chaos required for them to would just be insane even by 2007 and 2024 standards. But what they can do, again, is play spoiler. And they're a well-coached team because I trust their staff and I trust the CEO of their staff and of their football program, Jeff Brom. And Louisville, they're viewed as 13.3 points better than the average college football team per FPI, 12.9 points better than the average college football team per S&P+. Clemson is not shocking at all viewed as the better team here. 16.5 points better than the average college football team per FPI, 18.2 points better than the average college football team per S&P+. What holds Clemson back is their defensive performance, which we'll get to in a little bit, but I think more importantly, because their defense is still good, they just, in my opinion, I don't think they're as good as some past Clemson defenses. It's more so their strength of schedule. That 31-point loss to Georgia still tells us more about Clemson in a lot of ways than some of the blowout wins they've had, because even though they've looked impressive, as I said, none of those teams are even close to what Georgia is, and many of them are not even close to who Louisville is. I mean, Louisville would beat NC State handily, I think. Louisville, I believe, would beat They beat App State handily, for example, and they beat Stanford, and the list can go on and on and on. I mean, Louisville's 3 losses, again, are to very tough opponents. So these teams may be closer to each other than their record indicates, but I can say from watching these teams, from studying them, that Clemson is not just more talented in a recruiting sense, but I think that Clemson has a better overall coaching staff. And I think that the Clemson Tigers are also the better team right now. You factor in home field advantage here, which it's a night game. It's in Death Valley. Clemson's home field advantage is not to be toyed with. I'd say give 3, 4, 5, 6, I mean, maybe even 7 points in home field advantage to Clemson here. Clemson's projected to win this game by anywhere from 6 to 13 points, given the home field advantage that I just presented to you, along with the power ratings, which are designed to be predictive for neutral field. 3 points is pretty standard in the NFL for home field advantage. I think in college it can be anywhere from 0 if you don't fill the stands, up to a touchdown if you have a really intimidating home field environment. And per S&P Plus, you move this up to anywhere from really 8 to 12 points in the direction of Clemson. And all these things really line up a bit with that spread coming out. Clemson minus 11. It's now down to minus 10.5, down to minus 10 on ESPN. Clemson's going to win this game per the books, per the numbers, from anywhere from a field goal to maybe a touchdown and a field goal. The better team for sure, but Louisville is going to be a test here, and the models agree with that. Louisville, despite losing to Miami in a high-scoring affair, losing to Notre Dame, and also losing to SMU, all of those were by an average of 7 points because all those losses were exactly 7-point losses. They still have a positive points per play margin, a 0.076 points per play margin. Their expected points added margin is 0.149. They do get good field position, and they don't really have a problem moving the ball. Louisville doesn't. But when it comes time to score, tripping over my own words here, it's just like Louisville tripping over themselves. They have not done an impressive job all season long turning drives into points. It killed them against Notre Dame. I watched that game, and Louisville was able to get past the 50 into Notre Dame territory a lot, but once they got into Notre Dame's territory, and Notre Dame is an awesome defense, don't get me wrong, but this has been the case for the whole season in large part. The Notre Dame game was just the epitome of it. They struggled. Clemson, meanwhile, points per play margin of 0.254 on an average basis. When they play a team that they faced on their schedule, they dominate them. And that's even factoring in their loss to Georgia, where Georgia dominated them. In their previous 6 games, all wins, Clemson has been blowing people out. They've been assassinating them left and right. And that's why you see the points per play margin as large as it is, and their expected points added margin is 0.118. Both of these offenses are really, really good. I think it's actually the defense that separates these teams a bit, and the offense for Clemson too, which has been ridiculously efficient ever since week 1. That Garrett Riley hire, I think, regardless of how the season ends, was a good hire. And I said that in 2023, had some doubts after the season, but thought, year 2 with all that's returning, the offense is going to get better than it was in 23. And it has. I don't think that part can be disputed whatsoever. And the Tigers are top 10 in game control. Game control is basically a theoretical poll of how would the average top 25 team do against your schedule. And Clemson's 10th in that. Only 9 teams, all of whom are obviously top 10 per game control, most are top 10 or at least highly rated per FPI, would do better than Clemson with the schedule that Clemson has provided. Clemson has only played the 75th toughest strength of schedule. I mean, they haven't really been tested outside of, again, that Georgia game. In the other games, they have just gotten out to early leads or maybe been tested for a quarter, but their talent, assistant coaching, and depth really takes over. For Louisville, they've been battle-tested. I mean, 17th toughest strength of schedule, 49th in game control, and yet they were in those 3 games that they lost. They were in the SMU game, in the Notre Dame game, even though it felt like Notre Dame was really suffocating them for much of that matchup. And they were in their game against Miami. They were behind, but at points they would tie the game back up. Then Miami would march down the field and score again. But still, Louisville, the battle-tested team that's been inconsistent, but has enough talent and enough goodwill, enough fight, depth, and a good enough coaching staff to pull off an upset here to compete with the great teams. Clemson profiles as a great team. Perhaps Clemson is the best team that Louisville has played all season long. There are arguments made for Clemson to be better than Miami, better than Notre Dame, certainly better than SMU, who I think is the worst out of those 4 teams that I just mentioned. But maybe SMU's the best. Who knows? Clemson doesn't play Miami, and they don't play SMU, nor do they play Notre Dame like they did last season where they beat them. Clemson profiles as a great team, maybe near elite. Some would say boldly that they're elite, but they haven't been tested by any team close to that category since week 1, and when they were tested, they competed and fought hard for a half, but they fell apart. And that's not me hating on Clemson, by the way. I'm a Michigan fan for context. Clemson would kill Michigan. Clemson would do pretty well in the Big Ten this year, depending on their schedule draw. I don't think they would beat Ohio State. I don't think they would beat Penn State or Indiana or Oregon. But the other 14 teams, I'd probably pick Clemson to beat the other 14 teams. I would, for a variety of, I think, very valid reasons here. I think Louisville, depending on the schedule, could also have some success in the Big Ten. You go to the SEC, I think it could be a similar story as well. The SEC has a lot of, strong teams within it, but there are teams like Ole Miss right now where Ole Miss is underachieving way, way more than Clemson is, and relative to expectations, more than Louisville is. I mean, Ole Miss has looked vulnerable in any game where they have to face an opponent with a pulse, for example. I want to reiterate that, especially since many of the fans who will be watching this are probably not familiar with the channel. But anyway, the critical matchup here is Louisville's defense against a Clemson offense that has excelled at running the football. Because if Clemson can run the football, and they can run it well, then they don't need Cade Klubnik and his passing offense to win the football game. And I feel like if there are going to be mistakes made in the game, which I think is a necessary path for Louisville to pull off an upset here, I feel like Klubnik has to make some errors. And I think that Louisville's defense is going to have to step up and force some takeaways, more likely through the air than on the ground, because Phil Maffa has been good. Clemson is averaging 5.9 yards per carry. That's 6th. 199.9 rushing yards per game, 20th. They're doing it on only 34 rushing attempts per game, 88th. They don't run the football that much. They pass more than they run. They do. Their pass play percentage is 51.52. They run for a little over 50%, or they pass for a little over 50% of the time. Not quite as much as Louisville, but that's logical for Louisville because they don't run the football all that well. Again, strength of schedule plays a role, but what they've been doing on the offensive line with Matt Luke is very impressive. They're top 10 in both quarterback sack percentage and yards per carry offensively. I know that the opponents they faced have not exactly had good defenses, but when you put up those numbers against anyone, that's indicative of efficiency. That's indicative of good coaching, good talent. And I have faith in Clemson's offensive line. When I saw that Matt Luke was hired to be the Tigers' offensive line coach, I thought to myself, yeah, that's a good hire. That's a smart move by Dabo Swinney, necessary, because the offensive line has never exactly been a strong suit under Dabo Swinney at Clemson. It hasn't. And I think it's better, especially in the modern era of college football, where the game is shorter. Georgia and Michigan, especially Georgia with walk-on Stetson Bennett, who I think is just awesome college quarterback. NFL, probably not. It's yet to be seen if J.J. McCarthy will be a good NFL QB or not, but how Michigan used him, honestly, was similar to how Georgia used Stetson Bennett. Those three teams, the past three national champions, showed you a NFL-level elite deep offensive line can be better than a quarterback who you have to rely on to carry you the football game. And I think that was a wise move by Clemson of trying to adapt with the times, in addition to the Garrett Riley hire the prior season. So Cade Klubnik has been, look, he's been very impressive. He has. The Tigers are 13th in average team passer rating with a 160.1. Cade Klubnik on the season, you look at his numbers, he has a 164.5 passer rating, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's has 1,836 passing yards. He's completing 67.7% of his throws. He has 227 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, 5.5 yards per carry. He's only been sacked like 5 times. Really, really good quarterback. Really came into his own after that Georgia game and shocked everyone, honestly. But it's the ground game here that matters for Clemson, because Louisville, you look at their defense and also knowing in the background, trenches control college football, especially with the running clock rules, therefore the shortened game. If Clemson just wants to get on out of here, they want to impose their will, and maybe Klubnik makes some mistakes early, well, they can just run the football. And Louisville's rushing defense this year is allowing opponents to average 4.2 yards per carry. They're allowing 150.9 rushing yards per game, 36 opponent carries per game. Now, they've played Miami. Miami ran the football well on them. Notre Dame did as well. SMU had some success. And those rushing offenses are anywhere from good to potentially elite. So I think Louisville's run defense is better than the statistics say. There's probably a negative bias toward them in the statistics. And Clemson's rushing defense, by the way, they're allowing 4.2 opponent yards per carry, and they haven't played the teams Louisville has. So what I was saying earlier about the defense not being as good as prior units, I think reigns true a bit, but we'll get to the defense and the specific players eventually. Louisville's pass defense is honestly at a similar level to its run defense. I just think that Clemson, you're going to have a better time, as would anyone controlling the game and limiting the possessions of your opponent by running the football. And maybe it should be Louisville who wants to limit the possessions of Clemson by running the football. That's what these smaller teams have done this year and last year against giants they want to take down, except for the fact that Louisville has proven basically incapable of running the ball. They're only averaging 4.6 yards per carry, and they often find themselves behind, like in that game against Miami. And they have Tyler Shuck, who's playing really good football right now, and they have some good receivers. So it's better for Louisville to pass the football than run. So I think this is the key matchup right here, is Clemson's rushing offense and their offensive line against a Louisville defensive line that has some impressive players like Desmond Tell, Jared Lawson, like Thor Griffith, like Rene Kanga, Tremel Logan, Ashton Gillette, Raymond Puryear, and Miles Jernigan. That's one of the better D-lines, I think, in the ACC, and that was identified in the preseason by many experts, and I think that's reigned to be true. Clemson on the offensive line returned a whole lot. Tristan Lay at left tackle, Blake Miller at right tackle, Colin Sadler and Walker Parks at guard, and Ryan Lithicum at center. They returned a ton, and then they have like Trent Howard, a graduate, backing up at guard, Marcus Tate backing up at another guard position. They have some depth on the O-line. They're very well coached. They have some talent, and that's just two experienced veteran units. Louisville has a lot of transfers on their D-line, but there are a lot of older players, and they also have 3 starters who are redshirt juniors or seniors. Those are 2 experienced, talented, high-level rooms that are going to be going at each other. And if Louisville wants to win this game, well, what do? You give yourself more opportunities, I think, to score here, because your offense has been getting better throughout the year, and Clemson's offense has not been tested by even a defense at this level yet, ever since week 1. So bet on yourself, try to limit Phil Maffa, and force Klubnik to carry a game against a good opponent in yourselves for the first time since week 1. I think that is a strategy that could win Louisville the game. Will it? We'll have to see, because Clemson is a really good offense, and I think that they have a better offense than Louisville does. I'd take Clemson at quarterback. I'd take him at running back, at every position on the offensive line. Tight end is a bit of a push. Brenningstool is good, but Louisville has another tight end, and a few set of tight ends, in fact, that I like in Mark Redmond and Jamari Johnson. I would take Louisville at wide receiver. I think that Ja'Cory Brooks has kind of resurrected his career with the Cardinals. He had a really good year with Alabama in 2022. I thought he would be an All-American caliber receiver in 23. I guess he was injured constantly throughout the season, or maybe something behind the scenes happened and it didn't pan out. But he transferred to Louisville this preseason, and he's been their leading receiver with 44 receptions for 799 yards, averaging 18.2 yards per reception with 8 receiving touchdowns. Chris Bell, Afmari Huggins-Bruce, Colin Lacey, they have over 100 receiving yards, and Chris Bell, he has 2 receiving touchdowns. I believe that Colin Lacey, if I'm wrong, hasn't he redshirted? I think he's redshirted, right, to preserve eligibility for next season, because he's not just getting the targets that he wants, and he plans to be back. Correct me if I'm wrong. Jaden Thompson has 88 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. I'm pretty sure of what I just said, but I know that you Louisville fans, or maybe even Clemson fans in the comments, probably know more about this than I do. But Chris Bell, Afmari Huggins-Bruce, and especially Ja'Cory Brooks, that is a trio of wide receivers that I think is really good, especially with Ja'Cory Brooks as wide receiver number 1. You look at Clemson's receivers, Antonio Williams, veteran, he's had a good year with 5 receiving touchdowns, 393 receiving yards. Brenningstool is their second leading receiver. Tight end, he leads the team in receptions with 29. He's 327 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns. TJ Moore, Bryant Wesco, Troy Stellato, Cole Turner, Adam Randall. Those are other receivers with at least 1 receiving touchdown and 100 or more receiving yards. TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco are true freshmen for Clemson. Actually, oh yeah, no, TJ Moore is. I was just looking at the depth chart here and got briefly confused. But they're having good seasons. They're having really good year. They're having really good years, and I can just only imagine how good they can be in the future. Year 1 players, fresh out of high school, they have each over 200 receiving yards, 2 or more receiving touchdowns. They trail Stellato and Adam Randall, at least Bryant Wesco does, in receptions, but they do have more receiving yards. They've been very explosive, especially Bryant Wesco Jr. Antonio Williams is this team's wide receiver one, leads the receivers, wide receivers in receptions and receiving touchdowns and total receiving yards. I think Louisville has an edge in this room. But you compare the quarterbacks. I already read you Klubnik's numbers, but to remind you, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 1,832 passing yards, 8.4 yards per attempt, a 164.5 passer rating, and you look at his QBR, 87.4, which is fifth. You look at Tyler Shuck, 2,348 passing yards, 8.6 yards per pass attempt, 64.3% completion percentage, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, a 157.4 passer rating. He has a 74.4 QBR, which is 27th, and he does not run the football in the same way that Cade Klubnik does. He also doesn't have as good of an offensive line. Louisville doesn't run the football the same way with the same efficiency, and they don't have that same type of pass protection that Klubnik is privileged and fortunate enough to have. But I do think Klubnik, everything else being held equal, I think right now is the better quarterback. And Garrett Riley, great QB coach, even better offensive coordinator. I like Clemson's ground game with Phil Maffa having 682 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns. He averages 6.5 yards per carry. Cade Klubnik is second in rushing yards with 227, 4 touchdowns. Jay Haynes has 151 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. Clemson on the season has ran for 1,399 yards, 5.9 yards per carry with 15 rushing touchdowns. Louisville has 5.2 yards per carry, though they did play against an FCS team. That's why the number I just read you is higher than the one I read earlier, which is from teamrankings.com. They don't count FCS versus FBS games in their stat logs, which makes sense because not every FBS team plays those. And for example, like Auburn blew out their FCS team by over 70 points, and all the computers thought they were really good, when in reality it was just a mirage, and Auburn's probably still overrated by the computer models because they, of course, factor in that blowout performance. It's the same thing with Ole Miss. Ole Miss is not a top 10 team. They shouldn't be in power ratings, but because of some of their early blowouts, including one super efficient game against an FCS team, the computers think they're better than they actually are. For Louisville's ground attack, 14 rushing touchdowns on the season, 1,258 rushing yards. Isaac Brown leads the team in rushing yards with 649, averages 7.5 yards per carry, and he has 6 rushing touchdowns. Donald Chaney, Kejon Brown, and Duke Watson have at least 100 rushing yards as well and average 3.8 yards per carry or more. I think Phil Maffa is, I think he's the best overall back. I think that if you want to present an argument that Louisville may have the better running back room solely because of depth, I will hear that argument. But I think Clemson overall has the better offense, and I also think they have the better overall defense. I'd take Clemson at D-end, linebacker, and corner, and I would take Louisville at defensive tackle and safety. The Cardinals this year have 17 sacks, 17 passes defended, 2 interceptions, 5 forced fumbles, and 5 fumble recoveries. Clemson's defense also has 17 sacks, but 34 passes defended, 9 interceptions, 7 forced fumbles, and 4 fumble recoveries. Clemson's leader in sacks is TJ Parker, defensive end, with 5. Their leader in passes defended is Avion Terrell with 7. He also leads the team in interceptions with 2. He's been an elite cornerback this year. Louisville's leader in sacks this season is Tramel Logan on the defensive line, tied with Jared Dawson on the defensive line as well. Their leader in interceptions this season is tied between Quincy Riley, defensive back who was highlighted in the preseason, and TJ Capers at linebacker. Quincy Riley also has 1 forced fumble, 4 passes defended. Corey Thornton, yes, leads the team with passes defended on defense. Both of these teams, I think, have good defenses. I think Louisville's is a bit underrated due to the competition they've played. I don't think Clemson's is near elite. I mean, you look at the turnovers that Clemson has forced and also the turnovers that they have not produced on offense, unlike what they had last season. They have a plus 1.3 turnover margin per game. That's 6th. Louisville's, they have a negative 0.6 turnover margin per game, which is 98th. So between these two teams, past history, which with turnovers can be pretty random. So typically, unless you're a national champion or an elite team, well, turnovers are inconsistent, like Michigan last year or some of the Georgia teams last year, or the Penn State teams the prior 2 years who weren't national champions, but they were top 10 teams. They consistently forced turnovers, and that was a part of their identity because, well, they're just good teams, and good teams will do well with the fundamentals. They'll let other teams screw up. They'll force other teams to screw up. I do think Clemson is one of those teams. I'm just giving you that forewarning because turnovers can be random, so don't be shocked if Louisville just randomly wins the turnover battle here and it's a bit of a fluke. But history says that Clemson will win this game in the turnover battle by at least 2 turnovers. So whether that's 3 Louisville turnovers to Clemson's 1 or 2 Louisville turnovers to Clemson's 0. Also in this game, look at Clemson's 4th down conversion percentage. It's better than Louisville's on offense this year, 57.14% to Louisville's 50% exactly. Clemson's is 50th there. Louisville is 73rd. And you look at total defense, and Clemson is better at opponent 4th down conversion percentage, only allowing opponents to complete 50% of their 4th down conversions or convert. Louisville allows opponents to convert 61.11% of their 4th down attempts, which is 91st. So 4th down turnovers overall, traditionally, fumble recoveries, interceptions, all that stuff favors Clemson defensively, also offensively. You look at run defense, though. Clemson allows 130 rushing yards per game, 41st. Louisville allows 150.9. Both average opponents to allow 4.2 yards per carry. Clemson, if you extend the numbers out and you don't commit any rounding up to the 10th place, Clemson's a little bit behind Louisville, just a little bit. Both average 4.2 when you round up to the 10th place, but Louisville's 62nd, Clemson places 67th. And I say that with the face that I have because that's a problem for Clemson. Again, they face the 75th toughest strength of schedule. Some of this has come, by the way, in garbage time. Some of it. So you can't take all of that into account. But there are other teams like Stanford who were able to do an okay job running the football early. Georgia ran the football late. And I also think some of those performances where Clemson allows a lot of points later in the game, some of that's obviously putting in backups. But I also think that's partially indicative of the fact that Clemson does not have the depth that they used to have. And I wonder if in a game against Louisville, the best team they've played since week 1, that could be a problem for their defense. Clemson allows opponents to average 6.4 yards per pass attempt, 34th, 11.6 yards per completion, 55th. That's way better than Louisville, who allows 7.9 opponent yards per pass attempt, it's 96th, and 12.4 opponent yards per completion, which is 84th. In scoring defense, Clemson only allows 23 points per play, or points per game, 44th. Louisville allows 28.1, 81st. In points per play, Clemson allows 0.343, it's 51st. Louisville allows 0.411, which is 83rd. I think that Louisville's defense is better than the stats say. I do think it's the same thing for Clemson because, again, they get to huge leads, put in their backups, and then the opponents score on them. So I think the statistics are both negatively biased toward these defenses, but I don't think Clemson's is elite. I don't even think it's near elite. I think it's a great defense. Louisville's, I'd say, is above average, maybe good. It could also be average. I just know that they played Miami, best passing offense in the country. SMU has some good receivers, and that game, I think, was either the game R.J. Maryland got hurt or before. And Kevin Jennings is a good quarterback. I'll be talking about him later tonight or tomorrow. And Riley Leonard, I think, was beginning to get that passing offense going in that Louisville game. So they faced 3 talented offenses, 1 elite offense in Miami. As for Clemson, I just think they have a good defense because of the talent they have and what they have done, especially in the first half against every team they've played, not just since Georgia, but also against Georgia, where they only allowed 6 points despite having an anemic offense in that game. I would take Louisville at D tackle. I'd take them overall in stopping the run, but I would easily, and I mean this, easily take Clemson in defending the pass. I think that with what they have in Avion Terrell and Jaden Lucas, Khalil Barnes, R.J. Mickens, Kylon Griffin, it's one of the better secondaries in the country. Barrett Carter is an elite linebacker, and Wade Woodaz is a good college player, and Peter Woods, Peyton Page, DeMonte Capehart, TJ Parker. That's a good defensive front. Louisville is a great defensive front, again with Ashton Gillette, Desmond Tell, Jared Dawson, Trimma Logan, Thor Griffith, Renee Konga, and Miles Jernigan. And I think they have some nice players in the secondary, like Quincy Riley, for example, and Corey Thornton, and other secondary players, Tamarian McDonald, MJ Griffin, Antonio Watts. Secondary is not terrible. It's not like 2021 Michigan State level, or I imagine some of the past Louisville secondaries, maybe under Bobby Petrino, when they didn't have a defense in his second tenure, especially toward the end. And Stanquan Clark and TJ Quinn, they have linebackers too. I don't think this is a bad defense at all, coordinated by Ron English, but it's not nearly as good as Clemson's, and I'd say it's kind of disappointing given what they brought back. They were close to leading the nation in returning production on defense, and close to leading the ACC, if my memory serves me correctly, and they have not been the ACC's best defense, not even close, and they're even further away from being college football's best defense, so I'll take the Tigers there. In the trenches, easily go toward Clemson. Special teams, I think, favors Louisville. Clemson has not had good special teams play in quite some time. This season so far, they haven't needed it. They needed offense. They needed touchdowns against Georgia. Special teams in that game was not something that you wanted to hark improvement on after that result. And for the rest of the season so far, well, they haven't needed elite special teams play. That could come back to haunt them. It could. But who knows? It hasn't so far. And their kicker, well, he hasn't hit one past 38, and he's missed an extra point. He's 12 of 14, made 85.7% of his field goals. He's just doing his job, honestly. And Nolan Hosser is a more reliable kicker than some of the kickers Clemson has had recently, specifically last season. Louisville's kicker, 9 of 15, but he's tried to hit 6 from 50 plus, only made one of them. But he has the leg drive. He's 36 of 36 on extra points. I would give Louisville a slight special teams edge here. In terms of coaching, I actually think, this is probably controversial, but I think that Jeff Brom's a better head coach than Dabo Swinney right now. I don't like to look at what head coaches have done longer than 4, maybe at the most 5, sometimes only 3 years in the past, like more than in that range. And last time Swinney won a title was in 2018, and that's after that time limit. So I don't really care about that all that much. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a great coach right now, but would I pick him to be hired at the top SEC or ACC or Big Ten schools right now? No. And I think Jeff Brom's a better game manager, and that's really what I care about when picking or rating head coaches is game management and making staff hirings. Really, what keeps Dabo Swinney up there as a good coach, in my opinion, is his staff hirings. I think right now he has by far better offensive staff, better defensive staff, and better strength and conditioning. He has the better assistants right now than Jeff Brom does, and one of the better, I think, staffs in terms of assistants in all of college football. Still, it's why they recruit well, they still develop well, and they're a better team than they were last year, in my opinion. And I think it's pretty obvious. However, I need to see more than just 6-1 beating up on a bunch of scrubs that are nowhere near your level, but still getting blown out by the good teams. I need to see more than that before I say that Dabo Swinney's back. I do. And I've seen Jeff Brom, with far less talent than Swinney has ever had in his hands, do things against the elite teams, whether it's Ohio State in 2018 or in 2021. Those teams weren't elite, but they were good. They were favored over Purdue. They should have beaten Purdue. And he beat Iowa, and he beat Michigan State when they were ranked inside of the top 10 at the time he faced them. Michigan State and Iowa were both inside the top 25 at the end of the season. However, in saying this, I do think that Louisville covers the spread, but I do think that Clemson wins. I think it will be high scoring. I think that Clemson's offense and also their superior defense win the game. I do think, though, that Louisville, despite the fact that Clemson's off of a bye, they have had an extra day to prepare for this because they played Boston College on a Friday night, and they didn't look interested. I can guarantee you that they were looking ahead a bit to this game, and I think it will be close. I think it'll be competitive, just like Louisville's games on the road against Notre Dame, at home against Miami, and at home against SMU. They will play it close. They will have the opportunity to win, but they will lose by 7. Do not be surprised at all if Louisville wins this game, or also if Clemson blows out this Louisville squadron. I don't exactly have a read here, but looking at the data, the statistics, home field advantage, I do think that Clemson wins here and earns their 7th win of the season, and their 6th win in ACC conference play, getting closer and closer and closer to being in that ACC championship game, which they're favored to be in, and honestly should be favored to be in based off of how they are playing. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thanks to Crash2488, Brasco Rascal, and Connor Lilla OH for being Heisman members. Thanks to Chris Lane, Ismar, and Tyler Nye for being All-American members. Thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Seal, Austin Christmas, Joshua Jorgensen, and Will Loftus for being all-conference members. Have a great day, everyone. Make sure to check out my Patreon page, merchandise store, and Discord server via the link in the description down below in the pinned comment. Go Cardinals, and go Tigers.